Welcome to Generation Hope, a podcast by connect.faith. I'm Cali Bronkema, and I'm looking for stories of hope in the lives of young adults. This season, we're hearing from people who were just starting out their professional careers in education, healthcare, and other service fields when we were hit with a global pandemic. Today, I am joined by Brandan Persaud, who is a 9th grade humanities and special ed teacher in Chicago, as well as a doctoral student in education leadership and policy, focusing on early literacy intervention. So, Brandan, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to get to talk to you.
I'm excited too. Thank you for having me.
So I gave a brief introduction about what's going on in your life, but you're actually way busier than I hinted at. So can we just start by having you give a little introduction of yourself and just what's going on in your life right now?
My name is Brandan Persaud, pronouns he, him, his. I am currently a 9th grade special education teacher in Chicago, teaching a humanities course to our 9th graders, which is basically our world studies curriculum and English combined into one course. They actually started this course my first year teaching, which was now 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And we've just been revising and making different iterations of the course to make it better and to adapt it, of course, to the virtual setting for this year. Right. So it's been a fruitful process that I'm excited to be able to try out different things, especially now virtually, with that curriculum. I also, at my school that I work at, I lead professional development surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's just lots of work done that I've done over the past year and a half on that DEI committee, working on culturally responsive pedagogy, doing my own research, and I come at that work, particularly with staff, but also with students in my classroom with, I am not, and this goes against all the traditional things that I even learned or that many others learn about education, I am not the expert in the sense of I don't know everything. Mm-hmm. And when that happens or when someone asks a question I don't know, I take responsibility for that and follow up within the next day or so with more information, more research. So especially with staff on providing professional development on DEI, there's just so many resources that we go through, different things we're able to try out. And something that I really love about my organization that I work at is we come at all of the work that we do through just sharing. So whether it be within our own network or another school system, whether it be in Chicago, Illinois, or around the US and even around the world, we've had pre-COVID principals come from different countries and come and observe our school. So there's lots of fun work done, but also important work. Aside from teaching, I am also a student, once again, at American University online in their education leadership and doctorate program. And I just finished my first semester. It taught me a lot. It taught me how to effectively read a ton of work, given all my other responsibilities. And most recently, for next semester, I'll be an adjunct professor at American Online, teaching a course on power, privilege, and race to second semester freshmen.
Wow. I loved what you said about, working with staff on this diversity and inclusion initiative. And you said, I'm not an expert and I take responsibility for that. And I love that idea of, I feel like we all have the pressure to be perfect, right? And know everything. Yes. And sometimes there's so much more power in just saying, great question, let me find that out for you. Have you found that to kind of gain you more respect? Because I can imagine maybe you're one of the younger people on staff. You've been out of college for about 3 years. So how has that dynamic been for you?
Yeah, you bring up some great tensions that I felt in the past 2.5 years. I am one of the youngest staff members at my school. I started teaching when I was 21. I don't tell my students that because I teach high school. It's a close age range. But it's been interesting in a fun way and a challenging way to navigate how to work in a school that I'm working with other educators who have nearly 17, 20 years of experience in the field. Yeah. And there's this young guy coming in and not only teaching, but also offering and presenting professional development and facilitating that professional development to those educators. At first, I was scared, and I was like, no one's going to listen to me. I'm practically a child in their eyes. But something that I've learned is, yes, I am in now my 3rd year of teaching, but what I have to offer to the conversation, to our planning, to whatever resources we're collecting, matters just as much as the person who has 20 years of experience. So it's been something that has been on my mind and is on my mind a lot as I go into my doctoral program. I am also the youngest in that program as well. So it's been interesting to navigate.
Well, so you mentioned you decided to become a teacher when you were 21, fresh out of AU.
Yeah.
So what motivated you to do that? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but you joined the school through Teach for America. Is that right? So yes. What went behind that decision-making process?
Yeah. So it was, I graduated American for undergrad, so I'm going to be a double eagle. But I graduated American in 2018, a year early, because I financially just could not stay.
Yeah. As I might add, so many people at American that we both know had to make that choice. Yep. It's just hard. It's really hard.
It is a very hard decision. I finished in 2018, and I had anticipated to finish in 3 years and work in DC at the nonprofit I was already working at for what would have been my 4th year at American. So I could be able to save up, and I would have that year to really save up and explore, like, what do I want to do next? Right. My last year at American, I did the best academically, but also I was the busiest, ironically. And I was working at a nonprofit, working with LGBTQ plus youth in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And it was also providing professional development to teachers, school systems, university staff, on how to be more culturally responsive particularly to LGBTQ plus youth and those of color. And I was also an RA that last year to freshmen. So there was lots of late nights of being on call, being on duty, whatever the case may be. And I was just really stretched thin. And my experience at the nonprofit really solidified my want to go into education. I was working across, like I said, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, different middle schools, high schools, and colleges and universities. And that experience really solidified that I wanted to be in one school, have my own group of students who either identified as LGBTQ plus or allies, and work with them within my school. So that's what led me to apply for Teach for America. And I was actually approached by a recruiter on LinkedIn, and it was sketchy because they were like, someone's going to be in your area. I want to get coffee. And I'm like, I don't know. And one of my good friends went through TFA, and she was in her 2nd year at the time in New York. And so I did, of course, my own research before responding and saying yes to meeting with the recruiter. I also spoke with my friend on like what her experience has been, and she was very open and honest, and we appreciate that so much. So fast forward, I met with a recruiter, applied, and was admitted into the program. Another, like, I shared this, but the financial aspect of leaving American early for undergrad weighed on me heavily, and I knew that for me, I wanted to pursue another degree, a master's degree. And I just, at the time, financially, it was not feasible for me. So when I received the admittance letter into Teach for America, I looked at the different regions that some offered a master's program, some required it, depending on the state's requirements for educators and alternative certificate programs. So I made it a point to make sure that I chose the regions that had that additional education piece. And some may say that's selfish. And part of me says yes, and it's also I'm going to get a degree at the same time as teaching, so I'm able to take what I'm doing in my own school, in my own classroom, and really personalize this approach to how I am educating others and how I'm working with my students to get the best outcomes there is. So I finished this past summer with a master's in teaching special education, kindergarten up to 21. And yeah.
I want to touch on, you brought up some people might say it's selfish that you specifically looked at TFA contracts that allowed you to pursue a master's. Selfish is such a loaded word. And so when I think about what were your intentions behind choosing that, were you doing it for you? Yes. But is this degree self-serving? You know, you're getting a degree in education solely to educate others. Did you find when you announced that, I remember seeing your Facebook post that you said, I'm doing TFA. Did you find any people accusing you of that selfishness? Or is it something that kind of was in your mind that you were worried someone might bring up?
Yeah. So no one mentioned it to me that it was selfish per se from that post or follow-up conversations, but I did. It's funny you mentioned that post. It came up on my 3-year memories 2 days ago, and I was reading over, and I did include the part of everyone has different opinions on alternative teaching programs, 2 Teach for America. So let me know if you want to chat. And I think someone had posted something of just getting a bad taste from a Teach for America recruiter coming into one of their education classes at American and undergrad, and I guess pitching, quote unquote, the program. And I had read that, and all at the same time I was in the process of applying. I was in the process of doing my own research of what others outside of the organization are saying, but then what also others are saying from within. So my intentions of going into education was not to, or specifically Teach for America, was not to let me get another degree and leave. That has never been me, and our work together, our first year at American and undergrad with CBRS, or community-based research scholars, is you don't just do something and leave. You're not working for other people. And I take that approach into my classroom. I'm working with my students. I'm working with my school administrators. And if I was the type of person to just Teach for America is a 2-year commitment, if I was the type of person to just get my check per se and leave, I would have been gone at the ending of last year, my second year. But I have a real love for my school and my students. And while I don't think my master's degree, was the best in the sense of teaching me different pedagogy and different approaches to working in an urban setting with youth of color who, yes, I am a male teacher of color and gay, but also me and my students have different backgrounds. I think that was a piece that was missing for me, but I was able to supplement that with my work in my own personal work, but then also sharing that personal work with others through our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
Yeah. And you mentioned we were in the same scholars program, and one thing that we were really put into our brains was the idea of servant leadership. And, you mentioned you don't just go into a community and try to fix it. You really are supposed to integrate yourself into it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned if you had just come in for the check, you would have been gone at the end of last year. So take us back to 9 months ago. We're hit by this global pandemic. You're coming up at the end of your, technically contracted time that you have to teach through.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, how did that change your job? You talked a little bit about you had to adapt to obviously virtual, but how did that change your job? And then how did that impact your decision-making process of, you wanted to get a doctorate, you want to continue your education, you love the school you were at, and then there's a pandemic. So how did that all kind of work out in your brain?
Yeah. So backing it up to March.
It all seems like one long month. I know, it's crazy.
We went remote. We were supposed to shut down for just 2 weeks. The governor of Illinois was saying that at that point we would shut down for 2-week increments and take it from there, and then hopefully reopen right after spring break, which was in the middle of April. And as we all know, that did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
What did happen was I was thrown into several different roles of just as a special education teacher, working solely with our special education students. Whereas before, in person, I was able to work with both general education students and special education students to provide whatever interventions was needed. But when we went remote in the spring, I was a math teacher, I was an art teacher, I was a science teacher, I was the English and social studies teacher, I was a PE teacher, just working with my own select group of special education or students who receive special education services. I did not like that experience, but I knew that we were all being thrown into different roles that we did not expect, right? So it's that servant leadership and being a team player and adapting to whatever setting, and we're asking our students to adapt to it. So yeah, I'm going to adapt to it as well as a teacher and hopefully as a mentor to them as well. And all in that process, I was thinking, I'm not doing enough. I don't think what we're doing is meeting the needs of our students. What can I do? Like, what else is there to do? So I finished out the year. And of course, at my middle of year meeting before the pandemic, I had intended to return because my first year I was assigned a freshman boys advisory. And we meet in the mornings and afternoons each day, and then we have community building time each Wednesday for a longer period of time. And as they move on from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th to 12th, I follow them as well. So they're in my third year now. They're currently juniors, and I made the commitment. I will remember this. One of my first weeks at my school and with working with those boys, one of them was like, "Are you going to leave?" Because they've just experienced that many of their teachers or past advisors have left within a year or 2 years. And I said, no, I have every intention. And this was my second week of teaching. I was like, I have every intention to see you all graduate. So I know I had made that commitment, and I'm one to stick to my word. So there's that piece. And I knew, yes, the pandemic hit, but at the same time, I knew I was in it for the long run.
Yeah.
So then in May, I kept on seeing these advertisements for back at American University for the School of Education's doctorate program. It was a rather new program. I'm in I think the second cohort of students for this program, and I had been eyeing it since I left AU, actually, of just looking at like what it's going to offer and the components of anti-racism just really stuck out to me. And it's something that I wish, like I got bits and pieces of anti-racist education at American and undergrad, but I just wish I didn't have a lot of flexibility in my 3 years to take other courses that I want to outside of my major.
Right.
So I was just missing that piece, and this was my way back in.
You mentioned that you are, it sounds like, leading this effort at your school about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you mentioned it has a little bit to do with teaching staff, it has a little bit to do with interacting with students. So I'd love to just hear more about how that started, how you got involved in it, and how it's been going, really.
Yeah. So our DEI team is comprised of myself and four other people, four other teachers or staff members at my school. My school that I'm at is currently in its 8th year of operation. It is a public charter school in the northwest side of Chicago. And the DEI efforts, I want to say, started maybe about 5 years ago. And I was there for my first year, now 3 years ago. And then in my second year, a position opened up on that team to be able to help co-create and co-facilitate sessions with staff members. So last year was my first year. We did some planning over the summer with what our scope and sequence should look like for the year, what are our objectives. And we do that each year. We continuously add to it, edit it based off of the needs in our community and what's happening in the world that we're living in, given our socio-political context. So it's been a truly inspiring experience in the sense of I've just been, for myself, exposed to so many different texts and research and data that it's just eye-opening. And it unfortunately proves a lot of the things that we're seeing day to day, but in like fancier research terms, right? So then it's like me and the rest of the team at my school's responsibility to break that down into what does that mean for us in our context as a staff. Our staff is mostly white educators. What does that mean for us to a predominantly 90% Latinx community, under 10% Black and 2% other? What does that mean for us in our community and how we are interacting with our students, how that is impacting the curriculum that we are creating and sharing with students, and how is that impacting our interactions with families?
Right. Yeah, I think that's such an important part. We're learning and hearing more about the importance of seeing yourself represented in all levels. So I love that you're kind of doing the dirty work and making sure that that's a possibility for the kids at your school. And even if it's not a possibility to see themselves, that the teachers that they do see and interact with are empathizing and understanding and putting themselves, as much as possible in their student shoes. And I really applaud you for that. I'm so impressed by all of this. And how have you find, we talked about it started, none of us ever thought this pandemic would last this long. And here we are in, 2021 pretty much. Has the second half, I'm going to call it the second half of the pandemic, hoping that we're actually in the second half of the pandemic. But, you started a new school year, you started this doctorate program, and quite frankly, what keeps you going in all of this? This is a lot of responsibility. You mentioned you're about to become an adjunct professor at AU, which is even more. So what is keeping your drive?
I don't know if I have a perfect answer, but what keeps me going is just I'm here. I wake up each day and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to have my loved ones, my family with me. 2020 has been a tough year for me, for everyone. suffered great losses in my own family, as I'm sure others have as well. And it's been very difficult. So I don't know if I can name one thing that keeps me going. Yes, family. Relationships matter so much to me, whether it be with family, with friends, with my students. Just having that positive relationship with someone else is something that I take into everything that I do. And with that comes being open and honest, right? So I can definitely say that for myself. And something that keeps me going, particularly this year, was the loss of one of my aunts back in May. She was a breast cancer survivor. She unfortunately got COVID and ended up in the hospital, and it was a long 2 months, and she unfortunately passed in the middle of May. This was a woman who was my second mom. She moved me into undergrad. She was there when I graduated, and during my time in DC and in Chicago, I would go back to New York where my parents originally lived. And I have so much family in New York that it's just so hard to see everyone if I'm there just for a weekend.
Right.
But every single time I was there, I made a point to either go to my aunt's house or we would go to lunch. So to make sure that we spent that time together. So just her memory and the memories that we've created when she was here is something that I will never forget, and that keeps me going through all the things that I'm doing.
That's beautiful. And I think it's something that, unfortunately, a lot of people can relate to right now. This is, so we've lost so many wonderful, beautiful people in this tragedy. And if there's any silver lining, it's the memories that keep people going and keep people like you driven. All right, so I asked you to be on this podcast. It's called Generation Hope because I think you're going to give a lot of people a lot of hope, because you're quite clearly giving your students hope. You've told us the story of the students who asked you their freshman year and your freshman year, I guess. Yeah. Will you stay? And you said, yes, I'll be that consistency for you. So you're clearly giving hope there. I was saying I was following you on social media and seeing your Instagram stories and everything that you're doing was giving me hope of, there are people doing the good work and fighting the good fight out there. But I also wanted to ask you, what do you hope for going forward, and what gives you hope?
Yeah. Something that gives me hope is, yes, I'm a teacher. However, I love working with others, particularly my students. I will always say this, I'd rather work with students at any level more than adults. But so definitely my students keep me going and give me hope because, like I said earlier, I do not have all the answers and I make that known. But I also am able to provide that support and that environment where students feel safe and that they're able to reciprocate that for me as an educator. And that is super powerful for me to be able to cultivate that sense of community with my students. Remote learning, whatever it may be, whenever we return to in-person learning, it comes back to the root of being able to cultivate that sense of community and safe community with your students is relationships. And I think that is the foundation. A positive relationship is the foundation of a successful classroom.
Yeah, for sure. I've been working with middle and high schoolers and elementary and preschoolers in my job for the past year and a half. And I'll tell you, the craziest thing that's come out of the pandemic is how great it's been for the shy kids, because they're suddenly in their home in a place where they feel comfortable. And the kid who I couldn't get 2 words out of is now telling me, Anthony is the most annoying person in my class. Oh my gosh, he talks about, and it's like, thank you for talking to me.
Yeah.
So that relationships aspect has just been flipped on its head. And anyways, so I know you have had to get a little creative and put more responsibility on your plate in order to financially support yourself in all of this hard and good work that you've been doing. So
Yeah.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell people about that and to tell people if they want to support you in this, how can they do that?
Yeah. So aside from all of the good work that I'm doing in education and all the different spaces that I'm honored and privileged to do the work in and work with others, I am a market partner with Monet, which stands for Modern Nature. And what that is what we do is we are a luxury hair, skincare, and wellness line of products that are all vegan, naturally based, and just great for the environment and cruelty free. And so oftentimes a lot of people ask me, like, why? Why do you do this? You're busy as it is, and also I don't see you as a salesy type of person. And I'll say, like, I'm not a salesy type of person. And it goes back to relationships, right? So it's being my authentic self and being able to cultivate those relationships with others. And something that drew me to this company in particular that helps me build a residual income through Instagram, of all things. If anyone is interested in hearing more on how to build, one, residual income through social media, or two, interested in learning more about hair care, skincare, whatever the case may be, whatever your concerns may be for yourself, feel free to reach out through Instagram. My handle is at Brandan, Brandan .Persaud, Persaud.
All right. So thank you so much, Brandan, for joining me and talking to me today. I think I am so impressed with all that you've done, and I think you're going to give a lot of people hope. So thank you for sharing your story. And this has been Generation Hope, a podcast by connect.faith. I'm Cali Bronkema, and I hope you enjoyed.